The Lift & Co. Cannabis Expo returns to the Metro Toronto Convention Centre, November 18th to the 21st. Discover and learn about all things cannabis. Get your tickets at liftexpo.ca. Must be 19 plus to enter and attend.
Maybe hemp seed isn't as good as cannabis, and it'd be nice if there was that much in the way of cannabis seed. But any cannabis seed that you're sprouting, whether it's hemp or cannabis, is remarkably good for you. Now you say, well, maybe the one's a little bit better. That's a possibility. But if you're eating hemp regularly, you're going to know that there's a benefit, and then you may say, well, okay, let's figure out how to increase our access to the higher cannabinoid strains that may provide even more dietary.
Welcome to the Miracle Plant Podcast, the show that inspires, promotes, and gives you a daily dose of inspiration from the people who have used cannabis to change their lives in extraordinary ways. Here's your host, Justin Benton.
Welcome, everybody, to the Miracle Plant Podcast, where we discuss this amazing plant with so many names and how it helps people in such extraordinary ways all over the world. Today, we have an incredible show for you. We have Dr. William Courtney, the world's leading expert on raw cannabis. He's helped thousands of patients all over the world. He was a part of our journey discovering the power of raw cannabis in its acidic precursor form. That's what the A stands for in CBDA or THCA or CBD or CBGA. So there's going to be it might feel a little bit like alphabet soup out here, but we're going to get into the nitty gritty here. I've got my co-hosts here with me on stage as well, Janet and Dan and Latara. We're going to play this interview that we just recorded this week with Dr. William Courtney, and just hope you got your notepads out, maybe a Kleenex or two. We're going to have an interview right now with Dr. William Courtney explaining the power of raw cannabis and how it was helping. He started with people with late stage 4 and 5 cancer, and how much research he's done and how many lives he's changed. So sit back, relax, and listen to the interview that we had with Dr. William Courtney.
Welcome, everybody, to the Miracle Plant Podcast. And oh my goodness, do we have a special guest today? Many of you who know me and have heard our story over the years have heard about this wonderful man who discovered the power of this raw hemp cannabis plant. And you can all say it with me, Dr. William Courtney is here today. He was the one that we found the research back in, I believe it was 2011, helping people with late-stage cancer using raw hemp, raw cannabis, whatever you want to call it, and using it when having tremendous results. And that was the kind of the aha moment for us and the evidence that we needed and gave us the gumption to take the next step when we were looking to find an answer for our son's regressive autism diagnosis. And now, as we all know, who follow me on the podcast, know that he's no longer considered on the spectrum or have autism. He's neurotypical. We just had breakfast this morning. And again, we call it the miracle plant for a reason, because this plant helps our body heal itself and find homeostasis and balance. So, Dr. William Courtney, welcome to the Miracle Plant Podcast. How are you?
Very good. Thanks for inviting me.
Yes, well, please give for those of you that don't know you as well as I do and understand all your accolades, please give a little brief description of what you've been up to and all the incredible accomplishments you've had in the cannabis arena over the years.
First of all, I shouldn't be taking as much credit as you're trying to give me. Raw cannabis was used 3,000 years ago, in the Middle East, and my middle daughter's name is Unani, based on these medical schools that have been using raw cannabis. So we're really kind of last at the table, but it's as long as you get a seat at the table and make it part of your diet, the plant will do you very well for treating conditions, preventing conditions, supporting health. It really is an incredibly essential dietary element.
Absolutely. And how did you come to what was kind of those aha breakthrough moments for you to start looking at the raw side, the juicing side of cannabis? Was it intuition? Was it some research? Was it historical? What kind of led you down that path?
Well, if we go all the way back, I was a very much of a Western medical biochemist, pharmaceutical, just dyed in the wool kind of person. And friend I went to medical school with wanted to know if I would approve of his use of cannabis. And I was thinking, you mean recreationally? We're going to go listen to some music. I'm all fine with the recreational, but I really didn't understand the medical. But because of his request, I started getting involved in the research, and within a year was attending conferences on cannabis all over the planet, from Europe and Germany and Australia, and just everywhere. So I became quickly involved in trying to understand the science, and then began doing research, because it was, my patients were all Northern California, and they had a lot of experience, and it was a very rough lifestyle. So they had a lot of articular injuries and ATVs tipping over. And so they were the ones that were doing the cutting edge trial and error and just bringing the results. And I just happened to have the great fortune of talking with over 8,000 professional growers, and who had, tried it this way, tried it as a salve, tried it raw. One of the early ones was a woman who was using dried leaf for migraines, and used to take the leaf, dry them in air, crumble them into a fine powder, put them in capsules, and was doing dried leaf in capsules. But it was at a ICRS, I believe it was at Saint Savoie, up in Canada in like 2007, and there was a poster on the terpenes. The terpenes are these smaller molecules. They give all the aroma. So whenever you smell a bouquet, that's the terpene profile. And there's a couple hundred of those. They also call them the cannaflavins. So the cannaflavin is just a particular special term for the terpenes that are found in cannabis. And they are independent. They're anti-neoplastic, which is anti-cancer, antibacterial, antiviral, anti-inflammatory. They're the cannaflavins, the terpenes are very incredible, as are the phytocannabinoids, CBD, CBD acid, CBG, CBDV variant. So there's 4 or 5 members in each of the phytocannabinoid classes, and they are independent actors. But when you put the two of them together, you end up with a lot of synergy, meaning you'll get a result greater than the sum of the parts. And so when you move to the whole plant, you take a humble position and you say, we don't even know what's in here yet. We don't really know how it relates together, but animals for 34 million years have been consuming this plant raw. So we're going to sit down and we're going to do as other animals do and use it as a leafy green vegetable. And when you do that, you bring this synergy to the forefront. We kind of got a 10,000 year loop on pursuing THC, stronger strains, isolating it, removing the CBD because it reduced the psychoactive effect. CBD was considered kind of a contaminant that really was adverse to the THC effect. And so, you look at the early biochemist interest, it was in pure THC, but then we kind of began to understand that CBD, though it did not get you high, did do other things that were quite miraculous. And after that, we found out that CBD acid was also acting in a way different than CBD, because when you put that acid moiety, which is the carboxyl acid that's attached, that is a very polar group that has a dramatic impact on how the molecule functions. So CBDA acid and CBD, which is a neutral, are really pretty radically different molecules, because one has that very charged attachment and the other one does not. So you tend to want to lump them all together. Well, CBDA, CBD, THCA, THC. You want to assume that they are very similar in action, but in fact that they're diametric in terms of their actions because of that. So the plant is incredibly complex and incredibly synergistic, and that is the key take-home phrase. When you are humble enough to consume the raw plant as a dietary essential, you get the benefit of those very complex synergies amongst 500 constituents. And it's going to be a while before we have that kind of knot untwisted and untied, and can be really specific about the individuals, the group interactions, and then the sum total benefit that comes from cannabis when we're willing to consume it in its best form, which in my mind is living fresh, whether it's sprouts, microgreens. If you're going to leaf, you want to shoot for that day 80 to 90 leaf, because there's quite a spike that peaks at the end of the 3rd month in the plant. But there is also a spike that needs to be reproduced to confirm a Eastern European study that says that between day 10 and 14, the microgreen also has that spike. So it's a 4-day window. You got to pay attention to when it occurs, but there's a really good chance that the sprout microgreen will be the avenue by which everyone becomes a cannabis farmer. And whether you're an 80-year-old woman on the 50th floor of a Los Angeles high-rise, you can have that cannabis sprouting and bring the best of living cannabis into your diet.
Absolutely. Well, that's incredible. And those sproutlings, I mean, what's the cannabinoid breakdown? I mean, my hunch would be, and I'm asking the expert here, but my guess would be that would be higher in CBGA because it's the mother cannabinoid.
Well, that does lead to the production of the other ones, but it's a pretty full profile. And in fact, that would be the first experiment that I would reproduce is to, if I can find someone with the resources, if we could get a gas chromatograph coupled mass spectrometer evaluation of the seedling at, say, day 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, we should capture that entire spike. And if that spike is reproducible, meaning if that other study is accurate, then we can go to a fractionation and look at exactly, how much THC variant is there, how much CBD variant, CBN acid, CBG. It's a very, very, very complex mixture that, but we'd like to confirm that, in fact, there's a very strong spike in that window. And if it is, that really will bring the incredible power of raw cannabis into every kitchen on the planet, because anyone could rinse off a jar of sprouts, drain them, and grow their own. And they are an incredibly vital source. I mean, you got the best of the best when that sprout is coming out of that seed and just going crazy. Specifics we need to should be determined, but we know that there's enough going on there that are pretty miraculous in their effect.
Well, that sounds like a fun project, and I got a team of people and researchers, and we work with a couple of great testing companies out here in California. So consider it done.
It's a simple. All you need is a GC across that 4 or 5 day window, and if it throws up this big spike, we can measure the size of the spike, and then we can go after individual constituents, and then we'd be able to say, in fact, the initial study has been reproduced and it's valid, and here's why you want to hit that day 10 to 14 window. Well,
consider it done. Now I have something to do for the rest of the year. So that's exciting. Yeah. And we actually grow the hemp and get it all the way to full, blossom. And, the cannabinoids will be CBDAs. Usually we have CBDA and CBGA high strains of hemp. And, it'll be between 10 to 14% in either CBDA or CBGA. And then that's when we'll harvest and do the cold extraction for our tinctures and topicals. But then we'll also grow it in our backyard and juice it every morning through an omega masticizing screw juice, along with, celery, carrots, apples, and we throw some probiotics in there too. But it's incredible. I mean, I've been talking for the last few years. If your ears have just been ringing, it's been me singing your praises and talking about, this juicing movement. And it's really come a long way. When I started talking about this, 5-6 years ago, people thought I was crazy, but when they listened to me, it made sense. Like, it's a plant, juice it. And then in 2019 at CanMed in Pasadena, California, Dr. Raphael Meshulam came out and he talked about CBDA. And there was a study, I believe in 2014, with some Canadian researchers showing that for nausea and anxiety, CBDA was literally 1,000 times more effective at treating it. And so he released that information along with some other acidic precursor work he was doing. And that's when that was really kind of the, oh my God, the Godfather. If you look at the back over my shoulder, that's actually when we were there. That's a picture of him. And it says the Godfather of CBDA. Oh. You can't really see it. But anyways, so that was when the cannabis community started to opening their eyes to it. And I think we talked about this yesterday. They said, but in the research, they used this methyl ester to keep it consistent, so they can do kind of a pharmaceutical model of it. And their research showed that the CBDA was unstable, And to me, which I always thought is kind of funny, which number one, that's not true. Once you do a cold extraction and you put it into its extracted form, it's going to stay CBDA, for as long as it needs to. And if it were to degrade with, time, light, heat somehow, then what would it degrade into? It would degrade into CBD, which is not the worst thing either. So, and now the other thing that moved that along, well, let me leave it at that. If you had anything to interject, and I'll show you the next big step, which happened with people being open to cannabis and juicing. I assume you agree with Dr. Raphael Meshulam's findings on CBDA?
Yeah, yes, and the folks in Northern California, we were presenting papers in 2012 and 2005 was when I first got into it, and was, like I said, it was because of a medical school friend who asked me to approve his use, and I said, well, what am I approving of? And so by 2005, we were just because there are, at that point in California, it was a medical thing, so you needed medical approval. So I got into medical approvals and quickly developed, 8,000 personal patients and
Wow.
40,000 people in the area that were reading newspaper articles and listening to talks on the radio, and there was just an enormous amount of information that was being willowed or winnowed out as we looked at all the ways people were using it, all the conditions they were using it for, and from a physician standpoint, it's kind of like, how can one thing have such a broad and diverse effect? And that's what led me into the endogenous cannabinoid system. And every one of our cells, the intracellular environment called the endocrine. So endocrine is the whole body regulation, the testicles, the ovaries, the adrenal glands, the thyroid. That is the endocrine system. Paracrine is a cluster of cells producing a common product. Autocrine is regulation across the plasma membrane. Well, intracrine, the intracellular environment, is really the domain of the endogenous cannabinoid. Every cell has a nucleus, brings in raw materials, constructs a product, secretes it. So the mechanism by which all that's done is pretty much identical from cell to cell to cell. And so when you support regulation of cell function, and you don't stick it to a particular cell type or tissue, you essentially have this ability to deal with any kind of genetic disorder that might arise, where there's going to be an abnormality in synthesis. And so it allows this disease, wherever it arises, to be ameliorated, because that disease has to be operating in that same environment. And the exogenous cannabinoids come in, support the endogenous, and suddenly you have this plant that can help any cell because it's involved in cell regulation. And so therefore, I suddenly came to a bit of an understanding of why the cannabis has such a broad ability to assist, because you're not targeting the symptoms of diabetes or the pain of inflammation. You're looking at cell function, and all those disease processes occur at the cell. So if you are at the cellular level, you can be helping with insulin resistance, glucose elevations. You can be helping with high blood pressure, low blood pressure. It's like, how can something help both high and low? Because it's helping the body to get back to a normal level of optimal function, and that's what its primary focus is to assist ideal functioning of a trillion cells. And it means it's a complex environment. I mean, there's some estimates that our solar system, the Milky Way, has 100 billion stars. And so if in fact there are roughly 1 trillion cells in the human being, a simple mental kind of analogy would be, we have close to 700 to 1,000 Milky Way galaxies worth of cells in the body. And that's more than mind-boggling, but someone could probably correct me on the math, but that is an approximation, giving us a sense of regulation is one of the big mysteries in life. I mean, you take that many components and you try to regulate them to function in a uniform and optimized fashion, you are getting close to the mystical.
Yeah, well, that's beautiful, and I'm glad we have all that on recording, because that's some poetry in motion. So now that we know this and we're having this conversation, and you discovered it before I did, And, it unlocked my son's potential to heal himself and his inflammation and the neurological elements and the pesticides and the heavy metals and everything that had got locked into his brain and what was not allowing his body to operate efficiently, because he was healthy, happy, playing catch, talking, walking, and then bam, it all disappeared. And so how do we get the word out? I mean, we're going to, trust me, I'll get this all over the place, and we go to all the conventions and all those kinds of things. First of all, how have you seen things change as far as people? I mean, there's been a lot of change in the way people perceive cannabis, especially even the name of it. How have you seen it, kind of shift over the last, let's say, 10 years? And what's the next steps to keep pushing through that people can really understand that this plant is what we all should be taking on a daily basis to find that balance or homeostasis?
We've got to get that dietary analysis, that little box of nutrients that's on the back of every candy bar and juice and cereal pack. They list important elements. The terpenocannabinoids are a critical element, and that the amount of that's available needs to be information supplied to the consumer of food, regardless of its form. And so the more that we establish that these terpenes and cannabinoids are incredibly important for regulating cell health and preventing disease and restoring health, then we can move it towards being recognized as an essential dietary element. And so getting the analysis of the elements, getting it recognized as a dietary element and then an essential element, and being able to look at the deficiencies that arise from its absence begins to move it more into a dietary mode, out of the medical mode into a dietary element. And when cannabis perceived as incredibly helpful for such a wide range of conditions, it's going to be ridiculous to say no to it. I mean, there'll be some just rabid anti-cannabis people out there, but Darwin will take care of them.
Yeah. Well, what's great is, the Farm Bill passed in 2018 in December, and which made it explicitly clear that we can grow hemp nationwide. Right now the marker is 0.3 THC, and we're hoping to get that to at least 1%. And then get rid of it altogether at some point, but baby steps. And we're going to see, I've already seen it on some scale, but, fan leaves and hemp leaves and microgreens showing up at farmers markets. And the next progression that I was going to say was, Meshulam in 2019 coming out to the world of the cannabis experts and saying CBDA is the way, or the acidic precursors. When then this thing I was telling you about yesterday is Clubhouse. And so us in the cannabis hemp world have had lots of issues educating people, because the Facebooks, the Googles of the world, they don't allow us to advertise, to spend money on a platform where half the world lives, literally, every month. Like 3 billion people visit Facebook every month. And so it's just been harder for us to get our messages out, because we have this incredible message, right? Basically everyone, there was a celery juice craze. Let's have a hemp microgreen or a hemp flower or hemp fan leaf craze, and let's see what that can do. Let's put celery up against hemp juice, if you will, and let's just see what happens. And I believe it's going to happen. My estimate's about 3 to 5 years that we're going to see something. Who knows when that'll hit? But with the farmers markets doing it, I've got a friend out of Texas who's been on this show, Amos. He's got some hemp juice bars that he's doing in San Antonio, I believe. And, and other juice bars up here in Santa Barbara that have had hemp juice. So we're making progress, and Clubhouse was a beautiful thing for me to connect with so many more cannabis experts. And we've been able to educate so many more people because it's a free and wide open platform. There is no, shadow banning. There is no censoring. As long as you're not doing like hate speech or anything like that, it's a wide open platform. And it's been huge for cannabis and hemp experts. So I'm going to get you on there next. And I know it's only took me a couple of years to connect with you. So I'm sure, hopefully I can get you on Clubhouse in a shorter window than that. But tell us, what have you been up to? And I know a lot of us have have been wanting to connect with you, but you've not been on the mainland, so it's been hard for us to connect. And we can see your beautiful background on there.
Yeah,
what's going on in your world?
I'm trying to use my finger to see. Yeah, so this structure back here on the photograph behind my head, that's where I live. This is rainforest all around. And the photograph is taken from our micro hydro turbine intake. I go up there to clean the screen, so that provides us with electricity. So we've been in the wilderness, immersed. We've had friends who have sat on what they thought was a log, and then the log kind of writhed away, and they realized they were sitting on a snake instead of a log. And
wow,
it's just pretty crazy. The rivers are drinkable, beautiful, clear. They call it the Nature Isle. It's got 365 year-round freshwater streams. Most of the Caribbean islands are very flat, and they have to desalinate water to flush their toilets because they don't have fresh water. Well, this island is just a lush rainforest, and that surrounds us with raw waters. Pretty much all of our boundaries are a river. And so we've been out, trying to raise the chickens and raise some radishes. And I'm trying to focus more on understanding what's edible in the environment, because rather than bringing North American vegetables down and trying to make the earth say radish, there's enough green out there that I shouldn't need to be trying to grow something, because the biggest problem is you turn your head and it'll grow so much you won't be able to get to the turbine house. I mean, it grows crazy style. And so we've been a little bit, the island's been a little bit behind, the Caribbean's been a little bit behind, but they're now beginning to move forward with cannabis. And I'm hoping that the island embraces cannabis agriculture as a new ministry, because we're trying to move away from tourism with its deep COVID connections. If they bring cruise liners back with 5,000 people on there, they're going to be bringing in Delta plus variants and Lambda variants, and they're going to end up with a problem that they don't have the resources or facilities. I mean, they don't have the hospital beds or ventilators to handle a big problem. So I've been pushing real hard in the last couple of weeks, trying to get the administration to embrace cannabis agriculture as a way of providing income to people that are no longer driving tour buses and kind of courting the external tourists, which really would be a problem over time and maybe a very short period.
So do you have some cannabis plants down there? Do you have some seeds that you're doing some growing down there?
Yeah, and it looks like I could be heading up either a branch of a ministry, the Ministry of Health or Ministry of Agriculture, or there may just be a Ministry of Cannabis Agriculture. So regardless of what it's called, we're looking at, there's a lot of people growing cannabis, and it's somewhat under the radar. There's a little bit legal, but we're now considering come in, register, tell us, are you growing 10 plants, 100 plants, quarter acre, half acre, 2 acres, and then they will spring for the CO2 extractor, and people will be able to bring their biomass in, turn it into oil, and liquidate that, and it would be hopefully a well-accepted industry supported by the government that will allow farmers to, right now they're growing dasheen, which is a large tuber, and they'll grow acres and acres. And it's a lot of work, loosening the soil, planting, harvesting it. If that same amount of energy was put into cannabis, we could be providing a lot of oil to pharmaceutical companies looking for basic raw extracts to work from. And it really would be a big upgrade in terms of finances for the individual small farmer on the island to trade their potatoes in for cannabis.
Well, you're just the man for the job, and I know I'll have to come down and visit as the world starts to open back up again. And we're doing some pretty exciting things with some governments in Latin America, so I'm sure we can collaborate. And I think I mentioned, like, we work with Bob Hoban, and he's got some really great connections in different governments all over Latin America, and we're making some progress. And it's exciting because when you get into other countries that have maybe even certainly have an open mind to listening to the science and listening to because maybe there is a little bit more desperation of like filling a void of tourism, or either if you're in a third world country and economics are poor, or you have citizens that are, just simply having hunger issues. When you're looking to solve a massive problem, this plant comes along, and as we all know with Jack Herrera, and hemp may not save the world, but it's the only thing that can. Teaching people how to grow it in their backyard, and that you can use it for nutrients, you can use it for protein, the seeds, and we're really starting to make some progress out here with hemp wood and hemp housing and growing materials out of this plant. So, there is no other plant that I know of that can nurse you when you're sick, feed you when you're hungry, and give you shelter. Even I think Henry Ford built a car out of hemp and had some hemp gasoline powered it. So it basically is the green buffalo of plants, and it's amazing what it can do. And I'm just so excited that we got a chance to connect, and I'm sure we'll be working together. And I know I'm helping you out with a little project with the cannabis witness expert that by the time this podcast is out, it'll be up and running. I'm confident you want to talk a little bit about that project. And I know you've been a world-class expert in cannabis. What's been going on with that?
Well, I was very involved in it when I lived in California. And sometimes there was some anti-cannabis individuals in the judiciary who have their own personal feelings about cannabis. And I've had people issue warrants for my arrest, and people that really thought I was just too much of an advocate for cannabis. They really wanted to see people come in and get crushed for their relationship to cannabis. And I'd come in with the United States government's patent cannabinoids as antioxidants and neuroprotectants. And that patent right there is going to protect anyone growing cannabis, because essentially you're going to be following their kind of human dose guidelines that are printed in that particular patent. And it's quite gracious in it's your right to grow cannabis, to acquire a working dose. And they were focusing a bit on CBD, but like you said, CBDA acts in an entirely different way, and you really don't want to be throwing any of those molecules under the bus until we have a much better understanding of what they're all doing, both, like I said, independently, and most significantly when they get synergistic. And so a lot of additional research that will be fun to conduct, but primarily the message is it is a dietary essential. The nice thing about the sprouts is that any person anywhere on the planet, you don't need expensive gear, you don't need soil, you don't need to be able to lift heavy pots. If you got a quart jar, you are a hemp farmer, and you can get I've had patients that have brought in 50 pounds of hemp seed. You can get a boxcar full. Maybe hemp seed isn't as good as cannabis, and it'd be nice if there was that much in the way of cannabis seed. But any cannabis seed that you're sprouting, whether it's hemp or cannabis, is remarkably good for you. Now you say, well, maybe the one's a little bit better. That's a possibility. But if you're eating hemp regularly, you're going to know that there's a benefit. And then you may say, well, okay, let's figure out how to increase our access to the higher cannabinoid strains that may provide even more dietary.
This is the sound cannabis companies hear when they try to place an ad on Facebook, Twitter, or Google. The tech overlords' arbitrary discrimination against our industry is unfair. But until they change their restraint of trade policies, we need an alternative way to share our message with our customers. Cannabis podcasts are one of the last advertising platforms not controlled by tech monopolies. And for as low as $9.99 a week, cannabis companies have the freedom to play their uncensored commercials to customers around the world. Don't let tech bosses dictate how you run your business. Go to PodCONX.com. That's PodCONX.com. And for just $9.99 per week, you can go from this to this.
You can see a time not too far from now, a couple years, where as we start to do a little bit more research, and for those that need the logic and the science, that's what we'll do. But for those of us that have already seen how it's affected our lives or loved ones' lives firsthand, you don't need any more evidence. But I firmly believe that as we start to understand the cannabinoids and the terpenes, like you said, and the flavonoids, that we're just going to basically be able to figure out which cannabinoid really does a number on a certain thing, whether it was seizures, you know, and CBD. That was a breakthrough, and we're starting to see some breakthroughs with CBDA and CBGA with autism. And as we start to see, like, we'll be able to understand the cannabinoids, and certainly the terpenes, I think, is kind of the mystery component of the plant here, that it really, you know, the delivery system of the cannabinoids, and has even, you know, I think beta carotene even interacts with the endocannabinoid system, that we'll be able to grow plants for ailments. And then the next generation will be like, we have these genetic tests and all these things that we're doing, that we'll be able to grow a cannabis plant that's basically designed to supplement our endocannabinoid systems and bodies where we may be deficient in certain areas. So that might be 5 years down the road or what have you, but I just see this is the new frontier, and this is from nature, this is from Mother Earth, and just is so excited to continue to educate and learn and research and just get the word out. You know what I mean? Just so much to look forward to.
And you know, some of those strains up in Bhutan that maybe have not been hybridized selectively, you know, so if there's 150 of the 2021 carbons and 130, 200 of the 10 to 15 carbon molecules, it's a complex environment. And so if you go for a wild type cannabis plant, maybe it's not going to have 15% CBD or, you know, 30% CBD, but it's likely to have the CBD acids and the CBG acids and the variants of these, and 3 carbon tails and the 5 carbon tails. And in fact, there may be something in that complexity that doesn't hit the buzzer quite as hard as a monomolecular hybrid that, you know, okay, I'm getting 30% CBD. This is a walkaway CBD plant. But that's probably about the time that cannabichromene variant is the one that you're really looking for, and it's been pushed off the table as we selectively kind of raise our plants. And because if something goes up, something's going down. And I don't think we're in a position to really decide which molecules we need less of. I know, you know, you get 10,000 articles on CBD, and suddenly there's a headlong rush to let's grow a lot of CBD and make a lot of money. But besides the money part, if you're interested in the sum total benefit of this plant, you got to remain open to, well, what if we had a plant that had 1 to 2% of all 150? I mean, you can't get 2% of 150 different molecules. Now, there's going to be some less than 1, there'll be some maybe 1.2, 1.5. They're not what you call dramatic plants in terms of their genetics, but they may be quite dramatic in the sum total dietary benefit of allowing nature over 34 million years to put that profile together, not so much the humans in race down this cannabinoid, race down that cannabinoid. You know, we can run roughshod over some pretty elegant design work, and I'm trying to back up, and I'm looking for the most wild type, evenly distributed, you know, or not evenly, but, you know, completely distributed. I'd like a little bit of all of them there, because there's probably a really good reason that they are there. And we may not be able to decipher that as quickly as we would like, because we tend to be myopic on, you know, get a subject matter that we're familiar with and just go crazy on that, and, you know, ignore the rest. But I think this plant, you know, if we could get to like some of those huge wild strains that have not been selectively hybridized, we should put them on a comparison with our more, you know, kind of hybridized plants, and look at the sum total of the benefits. You know, I know you're not going to outperform a 40% CBD plant for that cannabinoid, but if, you know, CBG or CBC or CBN or happens to be the one that is in critical need, you know, you may find that the dietary plant will be there for you, because it's going to revere all of the elements that have been developed over 34 million years.
Yeah, I mean, nothing like the test of time. The 34 million years of Mother Nature and natural selection working in its finest. No lab with some isolated white, you know, synthetic powder that's trying to represent 34 million years of work will ever measure up. So we know that. and
Yeah.
other people we need to convince, but
Yeah.
that's wonderful. Well, I want to thank you so much for coming on. It's been an absolute honor. I'm so happy that we finally got a chance to connect. I'm sure we're going to be working together and talking some more and seeing each other in the physical world when the world opens up a little bit more. But for those that are fascinated by your work and want to reach out, what's the best way for them to reach out to you?
So I have a Northern California phone number office at 707-961-1420. And you can leave a message there 24/7, 365. And if you leave me your email address as well as phone number and time, like I work Saturdays and Sundays, but I'm off Monday to Tuesday. Let me know when you're available and rough time of day, put PST so that I know there's a 3-hour shift. And the one thing I'm not so good at is late night California contacts, because that's, way into my sleep zone. I tend to get up at like 1 to 2 o'clock in the morning California time. So, I rack up hours earlier. So we'll work together on finding a time when I'm awake and you're awake, and we'll meet and I can answer what questions I do know and make some recommendations and support decisions. And sometimes I've been helpful when there's discrepancies in terms of family members, and what do we do about our children? And, as a psychiatrist, I can kind of help get people talking so that they can each participate in decisions made that affect everyone. And, if there's someone who's reluctant, you can't toss them aside. You've got to supply dietary solid science. Here's something, this is not psychoactive. This is something that is really good for all members of your family, from the rabbits, cats, and dogs on through the humans. And so, if people want to do family consults or individual consults, or if they've got a particular medical condition that is cannabis possibly indicated, we can look into that and in different ways of, the tinctures and salves are interesting, but they most often are not really full complex. I mean, you can do a CO2 extraction that is gives you something that you can use if you're traveling and don't have access to fresh. So you can get a pretty close snapshot if you do a cold first pull extract, and a capsule of that very complex oil is going to have most of what's in the raw, and that could be a lot easier to travel with if you're going up and down the state or doing something. But obviously, if you've got raw, a handful of sprouts is going to be hard to match in terms of complete and total benefit of this plant.
And then the website that we'll have up is cannabisexpertwitness.com, right? Cannabisexpertwitness.com, which will have your contact information. And I think we'll even have a little Calendly link on there so people can book and schedule appointments with you. So exciting. And like I said, I'm just so happy to have you on. I learned a whole bunch today. I'm going to be rewatching this and listening to this a few times. And so many great nuggets dropped. And just, I want to thank you for all you've done for the cannabis industry, for my family, for my son. It really is incredible that, you were the first person that I've ever come across that was able to, articulate and do research and science and show and prove that I always say, if you want to get high, go find a high THC strain and heat it. If you want to get healthy, just get yourself a whole plant and eat it. So I'm super excited to meet you in person, or virtually now, in person soon. And again, thanks for coming by the Miracle Plant podcast, and we'll talk real soon.
Excellent. You have a very good day.
Well, there we have it, folks. What do you say? Oh my God. I think I'm going to have to listen to that 10 more times to get all that information out of there. So incredible to have Dr. William Courtney back in the limelight. He's been down in the Caribbean, and he's been doing incredible things down there and raising a family, and just a wealth of knowledge when it comes to cannabis. So I'm just super excited that I was some perseverance, and I was able to track him down and get this connection going and bring him to you here on Clubhouse and bring him to the world and help him just get this information out there that he knows and he's been studying, and with over 8,000 patients in Northern California, and he's just a wealth of knowledge. And I know I'll get him here on Clubhouse, and so we can connect, because I know there's so many other great researchers, doctors, people in the hemp and CBD and cannabis space that are here for the right reasons, that are here to pay it forward for what this miracle plant did for them and their families. And it's we're on a mission, that's for sure. So any questions or any comments while we've got the folks here on stage? Go for it.
Amazing, Justin. Thank you for sharing that with us. Been following Dr. William Courtney for a while, so it was awesome to just get some more insight and then to hear you and your questions with them. Just thank you. One of the questions I had, which I think he answered, was I was curious what the cannabinoid content of like seedlings and sprouts were compared to like the mature plant, but he seemed to answer that. But that was probably one of the forefront questions I had. But thanks for doing this, Justin.
You bet, brother. And I dropped your name in there too, so that's cool.
Dude.
And this will be on our Miracle Plant podcast on Apple and PodCONX and other places. And yeah, man, the hemp juicing revolution, and he'll be around. We'll get him on more things, and we'll figure out ways for you guys to collaborate and all those kinds of things. But and we're gonna do testing. We're gonna test those hemp greens. We're gonna see what's going on in there. So we're gonna grow some hemp seedlings, some hemp sprouts, and send them in. Let's get more data. Let's get more, everything we possibly can. And if we can turn hemp farmers into from little, mason jars all over the world, people could be growing their own hemp greens. It's just incredible what this plant can do. And again, I want to thank Clubhouse and Paul Davidson and Seth Rohan for putting this together. This would not have happened. So many of us have met on Clubhouse in the cannabis and hemp space, and this has just been an accelerator for us to get this message out about this misunderstood plant. So any other comments or questions on the stage?
I would just like to say thanks for having this particular subject and having the whole replay of Dr. William Courtney. Like Amos was saying, I have been following him too, and I didn't even know about this podcast, this particular podcast with him. It was absolutely amazing, so knowledgeable, so powerful. I mean, just listening to him speak and listening to you, the conversation. I mean, I have notes and everything. It was really good, really good. It was definitely worth getting up. I was a little tired, but it was definitely worth getting up this morning. Just awesome stuff, Justin. Thanks so much.
You betcha. Glad you could be here. And we'll have this podcast. It'll come out Tuesday night, wherever you find your podcast, Miracle Plant, if you want to listen to it again and again and again. And his website isn't quite up yet, but he did have his phone number in there. And you might just play a little phone tag like I did for a few months, but he will get back to you. And I think we'll also have his email on that website when it's up as well. And he's just a brilliant doctor who has dedicated his life to this cannabis plant. Any other comments or questions?
I had a quick comment. I took notes too. I'm going to have a blog. I'll write up a blog that also highlights some of what he said for people that had trouble getting through all the information, and also hopefully will lead our group of people to the podcast and listen to this. Very unique and very helpful.
Absolutely. And any other comments or questions before we call it a wrap?
Yeah, I have one. Justin, first of all, kind of glad to meet you on here. I live in a unfortunately CBD unfriendly state. And the funny thing is it's an agricultural state, and hemp could probably save a lot of the farms out here. But I would pose the question, though. There was a lot of talk about strains. And when I talk to people about CBG out here, nobody knows what I'm talking about. And so I think you're correct when you're saying get people the data, because that's the only way to explain it to some people, and especially in rural areas. Also, my question that I would pose would be, talking about all the different strains. In the meantime, I'd like to see the benefits of the full spectrums for treating specific ailments, because I think just like a broad spectrum antibiotic, even before we know specifically what each of them does, it's still beneficial to gather some data just on general, and and I guess general full spectrums.
Absolutely. And that's what we were talking about in this conversation. That's what we firmly believe. Unfortunately, a lot of the research model is based on single molecule pharmaceutical model where they take one thing that can be repeatable over and over. And that's the FDA regulations, right? They want things that are repeatable, and they want things that you can have a controlled environment. And that it's just one thing that does this one thing that's measurable, like a scientific method. And so as we heard here on the show, as we've seen in our real lives, and as the doctor, really got what's called the entourage effect, to do research on that, to understand that the over 500 plant constituents working together like a symphony is really where the power of the plant is. And we talked about this with Dr. William Courtney today. And there's research coming out. We're doing research. There's other organizations, there's universities that are doing research on full spectrum. For us, it's more than just full spectrum. It's full spectrum whole plant, because full spectrum is really not a term that's being regulated. So people just throw that on a label, and it can really just mean that it's got a little bit of CBD and a little bit of THC and maybe a little bit of CBG. To me, full spectrum is like a full spectrum of light, where you have all the colors and the shades. Just like for me, full spectrum means you have all 512 plant constituents together, which is the only way you can get that is by juicing it or cold extracting it. So that's what we do, and that's what we teach others how to do. And that research is coming. For those, like I think I talked about earlier, there's 3 ways you can convince somebody something. 1 is by emotion, so you can hear a story and connect. 2 is by logic, which is the data. And 3 is by urgency and like deadlines, where you have to get those things in. So, for a lot of us don't need any more evidence. And sometimes the proof is in the pudding. So if you have regulators or government agencies that you're dealing with, or just local farmers, proof's in the pudding. Reach out to me. We'll send them some products. We have some topical products that are just basically cold pressed hemp, and you rub that on where the pain hurts and the pain goes away. I don't think there ain't much more evidence you're going to need than that. So, but I would love to help out. What state are you in that you're having issues?
Okay, so yeah, it's funny. It's not, even if the product worked, Justin, unfortunately, it's a mindset. And I'm in Nebraska.
Oh, go Big Red! I'm from Omaha,
where it's technically legal, but, certainly.
Hell yeah. We'll get a store going out there. There's some actually enterprises. I forget if he's the president of HIA. He's got a huge hemp thing. There's a Nebraska Hemp Industries Association chapter out there. We'll talk offline. I will get you hooked up with the people in Nebraska.
The funny thing is, it's growing wild everywhere.
Yes.
It's definitely the mindset is the problem. So
yeah, we'll fix that. We call it ditchweed. Hemp grows feral everywhere out there in Nebraska. And I actually got my brother and my old man sent me a bunch of ditchweed feral hemp, because it has traces back to when the Spanish brought it over in the 1500s, and they would have competitions in Europe, like Poland and Asia and Russia, to see who could make the best hemp. They would have these contests. So it's we will get the Cornhusker State on board, no problem. That's my neck of the woods. I'll connect you with some great people, and obviously, what a wonderful farmland. What a great place for hemp to grow. And there's also a big fiber movement too that we're talking about. So no worries. We'll keep talking on Instagram and email, and I will help you out.
That sounds great. Thanks, Justin. Thanks, everybody.
You bet. Well, any other final comments or questions before we wrap up with our Heal the World chant?
Hey, Justin, I'd like to give you an update on the juice bar project, if that's cool to wrap it up.
Please do.
Yeah, so it's looking like I closed my first round of funding, and we're currently working with the Juice Bar Consultants, which is very exciting. And our opening is looking to be about January 2022 here in the northeast side of San Antonio, Texas. We'll be heavily focused on offering raw hemp juice, but we'll also offer regular fruit and vegetable juices. And we'll be incorporating lots of hempcrete in the bar build out. And hemp wood as well. But definitely would love to have you come out, Justin, for the which we're looking to have on 4/20/2022. But it's rocking and rolling, so it's been really cool to like talk about it, start the planning, get the funding, and then start really nailing down the details, and then getting closer and closer to launch. So it's an exciting time, and I knew that you'd be interested in an update. But when that happens, I'll give you a heads up, and I'd love to have you fly out here to Texas and come join us in celebrating that opening.
Heck yeah, brother. You count me in. What's your timeline looking like? What are you thinking? And then add a month, right?
Yeah, typically. It's looking like January we'll have a soft opening. Awesome,
man. Well, count me in, and maybe we'll catch a playoff football game down there about that time. So that sounds like a blast. And tip of the cap to you for all you've done. And, you've done such amazing work in the hemp industry. And, not only with products, but with knowledge and teaching people about how best to use sustainable packaging, clothing, and shoes and underwear. And you are a shining light as well, brother. So happy to have you on stage. And I can't wait to go out there and help you welcome that up. So any other final comments or questions before we wrap up?
Justin, I just want to let you know that Zari's anniversary with 101 CBD, it's been exactly 2 years that she's been taking 101 CBD to help her heal from, and I said heal, from autism and epilepsy. So it's the anniversary. I'll be sharing that on my Instagram as well.
That's awesome. That's what we're all about. Pay it forward, one family at a time, one miracle at a time. And just so happy that all the stories that you've shared with yourself and your daughter, and we'll keep sharing these stories and keep passing them along, and just wonderful news. I'll be sure to make sure we get that out on social media and repost it and all that great. So at the end of every podcast and every meeting, we say heal the world, because that's what this plant does. And that's what our mission is all about, is to educate, is to offer the same products, to collaborate, to just raise awareness about what this plant can do. And once you understand what a plant can do to help you, you can start to understand what else you can do to help yourself, like eating other whole plants, and drinking clean water and exercising and going, getting great sleep and being mindful, the holistic healing that our body naturally knows how to heal. Just like when you're 7 years old and you get a scratch and you wake up the next morning and it's gone. You don't have to tell your body to heal. Your body knows how to heal. Sometimes we just got to give it a little extra help and eliminate some of the things that aren't helping. So on the count of three, we say heal the world, because that's what this is all about. So everyone unmute your mics. Even those of you, thanks for coming in the audience. You don't have to be on stage to say it with us. We're going to send out those positive vibes of healing energy to those people around the world that are looking for healing. So on the count of three, let's say heal the world. 1, 2, 3.
Heal the world.
Everybody have a great weekend.
Yes, thanks for coming in, everyone, and we'll see you next Saturday, 10 a.m. on Clubhouse.